Somewhere right now, a 19-feet snake is curled up in a spare bedroom, quietly digesting its meal. Not in a zoo, not behind glass. In a room, next to a laundry basket and a stack of unread mail. Sounds like a horror movie, but nope, it's just another Tuesday. Why do people decide to live with something that could easily kill them? It's easy to jump to that whole thrill-seeker idea, or maybe say it's a status thing, like an exotic pet version of buying a flashy car. But maybe there's more to it. If you ask the folks who keep anacondas, the answer you hear over and over isn't thrill, it's calm. They talk about the hours they spend just sitting by the enclosure, watching an animal that barely moves. It's not heart-pounding excitement they're after, it's a kind of meditation. A green anaconda can stretch out to 19 feet long and tip the scales at over 200 pounds. This is not exaggerated, the animal really is that massive. But size isn't the wildest part of keeping one at home. The secret is in how it lives. See, anacondas don't chase down their food like some predators. They're ambush hunters. In the wild, an adult can go weeks without a bite, and the biggest ones might go months after bagging a large meal. That's not just luck or weird reptile behavior. It's because cold-blooded ambush hunters like the anaconda know how to conserve energy. Mammals that run after their food are constantly burning fuel, so they're always hungry. Anacondas, though, play a different game. They hang out near water, barely moving, sometimes for days, just waiting until the right moment. When prey finally stumbles close, it's one quick strike, one powerful squeeze, one meal, then days or weeks of almost complete stillness while their body deals with the aftermath. And digestion? That's a whole event on its own. After gulping down a meal, the anaconda's metabolism cranks way up. Its organs swell to handle all that work, then shrink back down when it's done processing. So it isn't wired like a dog or a cat, flipping between playtime and naps. It's more like a living engine that spends most of its time shut down, interrupted only by rare, explosive bursts of activity, then goes back into low power mode. Once you understand that, it changes everything about what it means to own an anaconda. You're not caring for a pet that needs walks, games, or constant company. You're living with something that's more a slow, deliberate force of nature, quiet, patient, and only occasionally swift and deadly. Feeding time with these animals is a real event, rare, dramatic, and over before you know it. The rest of the time, everything's quiet. Most owners aren't playing with their anaconda the way a dog or cat person might with their pets. Instead, they spend their time watching and tending, double-checking humidity in the enclosure, feeling the heat gradient from one end to the other, looking for those little hints that a shed is coming soon. They'll notice if the animal is soaking in its dish more than normal, which could mean a shed is close, or maybe there's a health problem. It's such a different kind of attention. Everything slows down. You need patience, not quick reflexes. People who've been doing this for years will tell you there are long stretches where you just sit by the enclosure, hands off, not feeding, not trying to interact, just paying attention. They talk about their pets almost like you talk about an aquarium or a planted terrarium. It's a living world you look after, not a creature you bond with in the usual sense. The shift from seeking companionship to becoming a steward is what keeps a lot of long-term keepers interested. The thrill isn't about danger, it's about the challenge, keeping a complex, wild animal alive and well for decades in your living room. It's not about excitement, but about being meticulous. You care through careful action. But when you see your role as a caretaker, the animal's ability to do harm gets a lot more serious. You can't just shrug it off. You've got to plan for it. Every day, every step, for as long as you're responsible. Big constrictors have killed people, even in captivity, and anyone serious about keeping them doesn't sugarcoat that fact. For people who really know what they're doing, the danger shapes everything. You can have a snake that's laid back 99% of the time, but all that calm does is luring you into letting your guard down. Complacency becomes the actual risk, not the animal's attitude. That's why seasoned anaconda keepers weave safety into every single interaction. They aren't just careful, their routines turn almost ritualistic. Once a snake gets big enough, You need 2 people, minimum. One for the head in the front section, another to handle the rest. There's just no way one person can keep control if a big snake decides to wrap you up for real. Their cages have backup locks, not out of paranoia about the animal, but because everyone slips up eventually, and an unlocked door doesn't forgive. Keepers also skip handling right after feeding, when snakes are in that heightened prey mode, and again during shedding, when poor vision makes them easy to startle. These aren't secret tricks or guarded techniques, they're common sense passed around everywhere, from online forums to one-on-one mentoring to lessons learned the hard way. The stereotype of the fool who brings home a massive snake and gets overwhelmed doesn't hold up if you look closer. The people who stick it out for the full lifetime of these animals almost always share one thing. They treat the snake's raw power as a given. Not something you get over with experience, but a permanent fixture you build your routines around. The folks who ignore this or try to tough it out usually don't last. Their animals end up rehomed, or worse, things go south. That difference between pretending there's no danger and designing your whole approach around that danger is actually where the real appeal sneaks in. There's a sense of satisfaction that comes from just being competent. Keeping a massive animal like this year after year without a single disaster, that's no easy feat. The people who do it talk about their routines the way a craftsman brags about perfect joinery or a chef chasing the perfect souffle. They read the animal's body language like experts, figuring out if a twist is just a lazy stretch or a threat. Whether a tongue flick is average curiosity or the tense, laser-focused kind right before a strike. They learn how to control temperatures so the animal can warm up or cool down on its own, not just for comfort, but to keep its immune system healthy and extend its life. Mess up the gradient and you risk illness. Sometimes you even shorten the snake's life without realizing it. Then there's water quality, humidity, and enrichment, all fine-tuned to mimic a jungle riverside, even if you're thousands of miles away and working out of your living room. People who do this don't brag about the danger or the animal's size. What really makes them proud is precision, the careful, steady work that keeps everything just right day after day. There's another layer here, something people don't talk about as much. The daily routine, checking temperatures, swapping water, watching for signs of stress, becomes its own ritual. For a lot of keepers, it's a little slice of control and steadiness in an otherwise chaotic world. The animal doesn't care if it gets petted. Honestly, it doesn't even have to notice you. Still, in those moments, just taking care of things, the keeper finds calm. But nobody gets good at this by chance. Real skill comes from years of effort and from spending the money and energy to get every detail right. So that's the real question. Who actually sticks with it long term? And who gives up before the hard part even begins? If you want to own an adult anaconda the right way, with enough room for it to stretch its full length and an area where it can get both warm and cool, you're looking at thousands of dollars. And that's just for the initial setup. There's powerful heating, precise humidity control, strong locks, and thick, reinforced walls to keep that snake and everyone else safe. But that's only the beginning. There's the ongoing stuff, like paying for an exotic vet, if you can even find one nearby, who knows their way around snakes this size, and that's never cheap. Don't forget the electricity to keep the place toasty, or the fact that you have to find, buy, and store giant food items, because anacondas don't get by on a few mice. As the snake grows, so do your bills. And this isn't a short-term project. If you really take care of an anaconda, you could be at it for 20, 25, even 30 years. That timeline alone weeds out plenty of would-be keepers before their little pet outgrows the novelty stage. Most people lose steam long before the snake fills out. Reality sinks in way before that. Then there's the law. Loads of states in the US, and other countries too, have strict rules or full-on bans on big constrictor snakes. These regulations really took off after Burmese pythons started overrunning the Florida Everglades and wrecking local wildlife. Even though anacondas aren't the same as Burmese pythons, that fiasco shadowed the whole scene. And if you live someplace where keeping anacondas is legal, you'll probably still need to deal with permits, inspections, or even specialized insurance. So when you add up the huge costs, tricky laws, and decades-long commitment, you basically end up with a built-in filter. That changes how you should look at the whole thing. The people you actually find still keeping anacondas after years aren't just danger junkies picking up a new pet for kicks. They're a tiny, stubborn group who've pushed through the sticker shock, the paperwork, and the daily grind. That explains much better than any stereotype why anaconda keeping is still alive at all. But here's the real thing. Where these animals come from matters too. You've got anacondas that have been bred in captivity for generations. Those snakes are used to humans and confined spaces. Then you have wild-caught ones, ripped out of the wild and dumped into cages. They're a totally different story. And honestly, the ethics behind the whole exotic pet world, still hotly debated. Some snake keepers go out of their way to only buy captive-bred animals. They want to avoid the messiness, the damage to wild populations, the stress on the animals themselves. Others just don't care enough to ask. There's no one mindset here. Acting like everyone in the hobby feels the same way just ignores the facts. And about those calm anacondas, don't get the wrong idea. Chill doesn't mean tame. That snake's just doing what comes naturally, whether there's a person in the room or not. People see calm and want to call it trust, but they're only telling themselves a story. This is about all the different ways humans deal with fear. Some people back off from things that scare them. Others lean in, get close to the danger slowly, and, on the animal's terms, turn their fear into respect instead of just a shot of adrenaline. So, why live with an animal that might, technically, be able to kill you? For some, that risk isn't a bug in the relationship, it's the feature. It's always respect, not control. That's the only leash with any real strength. If you want more of this, subscribe. There's more hidden in the animals we choose to bring home.